I've been thinking about this a lot though. Has rap peaked? Like, is this it? Are we all downhill from here? Is everything just going to be a copy and paste? It just sounds like every time I hear an album these days, it's just a formula. We're fed all of this focus group hip hop. Nowadays, because of what this video is talking about, you have to set yourself apart. And if you don't, yeah, maybe you'll have your 10 minutes of fame, but then you'll just be gone in the flood of the next artist who's going to copy and paste the same formula. What's going on, everyone? I'm actually really excited for this video. It's my first time doing something like this. So I'm going to be reacting to another YouTube video. This is called The Culture Industry, How Capitalism Ruins Hip-Hop. Basically, this video is what my channel's all about, right? Fusing these societal issues with hip hop. I think this is going to touch on a lot of the things that I want to be talking about on my channel. So let's set it off.
It has always been surprising to me that hip hop, despite being one of the more politically charged genres, especially in its early stages, is rarely discussed in leftist circles or analyzed from a socio-political point.
Fuck. Exactly. This is the entire point of my channel. This is it. I think when I first wrote the idea of my channel, it was like hip hop and social issues have always gone hand in hand. Why is no one making the connection? That was the main idea. And this is it. Like, why are we not connecting that? And obviously the artist is, but like, if you go on Rap Genius, it's just, here's what happened. Like, there's no context, you know? So that's really what I'm trying to do with my channel. And when I heard this intro, that's basically where I stopped, because I was like, this is what I do. This is what I want to be doing.
Point of view. In this video, we'll be talking about the gradual impact of capitalism on the genre of hip-hop. In the past decade, many old-school hip-hop fans
Why does this instrumental sound like Meal Ticket by Isaiah Rashad?
And iconic old-school rappers have been proclaiming
Definitely samples.
the quote-unquote death of hip-hop.
Yes,
and that it has been taken over by a new form of trashy hip-hop music that people are calling mumble rap. Discourse on the evolution of hip-hop primarily tends to center around blaming particular rappers for the supposed downfall of hip-hop. But what most music critics and hip-hop journalists tend to miss is the systemic economic incentives and the socio-political ideology that have shaped the genre of hip-hop, and how these factors are not actually new, but have just taken on a new form in the streaming era. In this video, we will analyze how the evolution of hip-hop is more so a product of the changing incentives of our socio-economic system, and most importantly, something that philosopher Theodor Adorno calls the culture industry. Now, before we get started, I just want to say that I put a lot of time and effort into the making of these videos, and I even take money out of my own paychecks to enhance the quality and resources of this channel. So in order for it to be sustainable, it'll have to be fan-funded in some way. So please consider supporting the channel on Patreon. You will get access to a lot of exclusive content where you can learn a lot of interesting stuff. One-time donations are another option that is also available in the description. Now, before getting into the video, I just want to clarify that this video is by no means an attack on hip-hop or a dismissal of the genre as a whole. My username on Twitter is literally the rap nerd, and while I tend to prefer older school hip-hop, I also like a lot of contemporary hip-hop. If you would like to know my favorite hip-hop acts, I will reveal them at the end of this video. Now, before getting into the theory of the culture industry, let's briefly unpack what exactly mumble rap is and how we got to this state of hip-hop in the first place. Because the
You mean mumble crap?
Commercialization of hip-hop is by no means a new thing, and I think it's important to first understand the changing economic incentives of the music industry over time that have shaped the production of hip-hop. Now, mumble rap broadly refers to the trend of rappers with very simplistic, repetitive, mind-numbing lyrics that are often barely even understandable. In many cases, they literally mumble their lyrics, like they're barely even trying, on top of very simplistic bassy instrumentals that rely more on 808s and their loudness, without any complexity or the creative use of sampling. Popular examples.
I guess I'm just wondering why, like, I'm sure it'll be explained, but why capitalism to mumble rap, right? The influence of capitalism on rap was evident way before mumble rap, when every video was about, or every rap song was about sex, money, and that was what was in the videos too. Like, I get that mumble rap in some way took it to another level, but like all of that just strictly like not even from a music perspective, just like the influence of capitalism. I guess I'm just curious to like why the mumble rap. Why is this video starting with what is mumble rap?
Examples include the Migos, Future, Lil Baby, Gunna, Lil Uzi Vert, Kodak Black, and many, many more. If this
Did Lil Wayne not invent mumble rap though? I feel like for me that's like the first, even though like it wasn't really called that until Future, not even really like that was just his style. And then mumble rap, for me, mumble rap became mumble rap with Uzi, Migos. But I feel like Wayne and Future were doing that way before.
Cultural trend is completely alien to you, then I would recommend checking out the video titled The Evolution of Mumble Rap.
But all them niggas sound the same.
And if you want an idea.
And the funny thing to me about this video is that even the Kendricks and Coles do this flow now all the time. It's interesting to see them adapting to it because like Kendrick has been doing this, I think, since Goosebumps. Peter Piper, Big like Cole obviously has been doing this all over KOD, all over the fall off, or the off season. So I think that's really interesting how that flow has like, it's not only a mumble rap flow. It might have started there with the Migos, but I mean, it's basically rap now.
Of just how bad so much of the lyrics in mainstream hip hop are, and I'd recommend checking out The Rap Critic. He is a true hip-hop connoisseur, and his videos making fun of terrible rap lyrics are absolutely hilarious. Now, the origins of mumble rap are heavily debated. Some people say it started with Future, Young Thug, or the Migos, and others say it went as far back as Lil Wayne. But nowadays, mumble rap more or less has become a vague pejorative label to describe rappers who are just simply bad lyricists, and have similar bassy instrumentals and often rely on sensationalist antics to sell music. The label has been used broadly to encapsulate rappers that don't really mumble their lyrics, but just have low-quality repetitive lyrics and very simplistic production. This could include acts such as Tekashi 6ix9ine, Lil Pump, Blueface, Lil Yachty, G-Eazy, Tyga, Nav, Nicki Minaj, Post Malone, French Montana. Fuck it, even throw Pitbull and Black Eyed Peas in there.
Alright, French Montana's just ass. We don't need to name one song French Montana's been on that he hasn't ruined, or that he's contributed something positive. Like, it does not exist.
Comment to other rappers who you think fit this category of absolute trash.
Like, I genuinely want to know who helped French Montana get famous. Who put him on? Like, I'm sure I could figure this out, but like, who put French on? I'm gonna look it up.
Now, jokes aside, for simplicity's sake, when we are talking about mumble rap in this video, we will be talking about lower quality commercial hip-hop in general, with lazy generic lyrics, repetitive hooks, and simplistic production. But for those who listened to hip-hop in the early 2000s, it should be known that the decline of quality in mainstream hip-hop did not start in the 2010s. So how did we get here?
There we go.
Since its inception in the late 1970s and early 1980s, hip-hop started off as a unique Afrocentric genre that was authentic and politically charged. It was a musical expression of the socioeconomic conditions which...
Alright, before we move off, French Montana started his career as a battle rapper. I feel like I have to go watch these French battle rap clips if they exist, because you know that shit is trash.
African American communities were dealing with as a result of neoliberal capitalism and an even longer history of racial oppression. And the fusion of the sampling of older jazz records with simple beat-making technology was a creative way to make great music with very little money. Even songs such as The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, which was arguably the first hip-hop song to become a hit, was still very politically charged, with themes of poverty, racial violence, and depression in African American communities. This age included rappers such as KRS-One, Rakim, as well as groups like Public Enemy, X-Clan, NWA, Native Tongues, and De La Soul. In the 1990s, a time which critics often call the golden age of hip-hop.
What's the best album on this? Right here. Gotta be Illmatic for me. Illmatic. Let's pick three. Illmatic. This could be in Love Mob Deep. Ready to Die gotta be in number 2. Okay. Outcast, Chronic. Might be Tribe for me. Yeah. Or Lauryn Hill. I don't know. I can't pick a third, but.
Rappers became more skilled, advanced, and versatile while maintaining a lot of substance in their lyrical content. While some would argue that hip-hop started to become commercialized as early as the 1990s with rappers such as LL Cool J and Big Daddy Kane, it wasn't really until the late 1990s where hip-hop truly became commercialized and co-opted by capitalism. This was when more and more rappers started getting signed to major record labels, and not small record labels, the major record labels. Nowadays there's only 3 major record labels in America. As more and more rappers in the late 90s, and even more so in the early 2000s, began to be signed by record labels, they became subject to the incentives of the mass market, as record labels, who ultimately owned the music rights, pushed artists to make music that was more accessible to as many people as possible. In addition to being subject to the incentives of major record labels, hip-hop also started to be platformed.
And who is that market, right? Just obviously it'll get to this probably, hopefully. Who is that mass market that it's white people? It's all white people. That's just the market for hip hop. So that's who this music is being made for. If you're signed to a label and they're controlling your output, they're trying to make as much money as possible. Capitalism. That's what's going on. They're saying, how can we make songs that white people will like? How can we use black entertainers to make songs white people will like, often to the detriment of those black entertainers, rapping about drugs, gang violence, money, glorifying that, because that's what the demand is for.
Formed on MTV, which increased the importance of an artist's image in their success. This time period that started in the late 90s was known as the shiny suit era, an era dominated by acts such as P. Diddy and Vanilla Ice, and even where lyrically talented rappers such as Jay-Z began to significantly water down their lyricism to sell a lot of records. Rappers signed to major labels began prioritizing hit singles and started to rely on the same standardized formulas employed by a lot of popular music. Things only got worse in the early to mid-2000s, an epoch often called the bling era, where popular hip-hop music became even more commercialized and watered down, and the subject matter itself became ever more overtly materialistic, as rappers were encouraged to ostentatiously flaunt their money, jewelry, cars, designer clothes, and other materialistic possessions. With major record labels and big corporate brands investing a lot of money into hip-hop trying to profit from and commodify the idea of the gangster image, it is no surprise that this era was heavily dominated by commercial rappers such as 50 Cent, Ludacris, T.I., and Lil Wayne, who all had very simplistic lyrical skills and content and rapped about more or less materialistic subject matter, and used very poppy production to create catchy hits to fit in with mainstream pop, while still presenting itself as unique by leveraging the gangster aesthetic. That being said, it is worth acknowledging that there were a few exceptions to this mainstream trend with rappers such as Kanye West and Lupe Fiasco. And also the underground scene at the time flourished as old school hip-hop fans became increasingly fed up with mainstream hip-hop. The point here is that the watering down of hip-hop is not something new, and it started to happen ever since it became commercialized by mainstream pop culture. But there was a brief rupture in this trajectory with the rise of internet platforms like YouTube and MySpace, where many talented hip-hop artists who probably would have otherwise stayed
You got all my favorite artists right here, damn.
underground were able to find followings on the internet, and didn't need major labels to be heard. With less pressure to sell their souls to record labels, many creative rappers were able to become successful without dumbing down their music in order to be accessible to the radio, which is what most rappers signed to record labels had to do in order to become popular. During this time, we saw the rise of lyrically talented rappers that were unique in their subject matter and in their production styles. Granted, hip-hop was still commercialized at this time, and just as many mundane, standardized rappers became mainstream as new creative ones. But the internet still allowed many alternative artists to get famous who normally would have stayed underground.
This little section right here must have taken so long just to pull all these clips.
In hindsight, this was a great era for hip-hop, and even though many of these artists are still thriving today, their dominance on the mainstream stage was gradually replaced by a new wave of rappers in the mid to late 2010s, who initially emerged on the fringe corners of the internet, but gradually became the face of hip-hop during the streaming era. As streaming platforms like Apple Music and Spotify started to dominate music consumption, artists were faced with very new incentives as they had to rely on these streaming platforms in order to be heard. On these digital streaming platforms, artists are paid based on how many streams they get, and the first 30 seconds of a song is what counts as a stream. This by nature incentivizes quantity over quality, and it led to artists abandoning the art of making albums entirely, and instead just overly long albums with singles to maximize the amount of streams they get. A perfect example of this is the evolution of—
I hate that shit. I hate bloated albums. I understand this is exactly why they do it, but like it ruins it for me. I can't sit through 30 songs on Donda. I just can't. I can't sit through 30 songs on Certified Lover Boy. I can listen to a couple at a time. Like I do really like Donda, but like it's just too much. I think, you know, those 7-track albums Kanye did prove that the shorter it is better overall as a package. If you're listening to something as an album, if you're listening song by song, who cares? But just like Daytona, Kids See Ghosts, Yay, SRS really proved this. Like honestly, one of the best rap albums, just like whole package in a long time. Extremely short, like 23 minutes, right? Definitely prefer the concise albums.
Of Drake's music, who once made full albums, however poppy and standardized they may have been. But as artists gradually began to rely on streaming for income, Drake and other artists started to make much longer albums that were basically just playlists of generic singles.
Yep.
Additionally, because the first 30 seconds of a song are what is counted—
Oh, and then after the 30 songs, there needs to be a deluxe with 50, right?
as a stream, artists are incentivized to start off immediately with repetitive hooks to catch attention as soon as possible, rather than building up to them, which can be exemplified by the likes of Migos or Post Malone's music. However, while the decline in quality in hip-hop music can be partially attributed to the incentives of streaming platforms, that's clearly not all there is to the story. The decline in lyrical quality and uniqueness in hip-hop is symptomatic of a much deeper force, which has affected almost all forms of popular music ever since music became an industry of mass consumption under—
It's just crazy to me sometimes to think about how many of the artists I love truly sold out. And when I think about who are the artists who like legitimately have not sold out in any way, shape, or form. Kendrick did it well, but he still sold out to a degree. Maybe not sold out is not the right word, but he partakes in this kind of shit. He does songs with Taylor Swift, right? Yeah, whatever else he did. I'm sure he's done a lot of other similar stuff. Imagine Dragons, right? Just like to think of, you know, like Chance, great example of an artist who did not do it well and completely sold out. Travis Scott, like, still makes pretty good music. Like Astroworld was great, but I mean, the dude's on every commercial, like he's a walking advertisement. That's why I really respect, I think 2 artists come to mind that did not sell out in any way, shape, or form. And that's what makes their music even more special. I think Earl Sweatshirt is one. If anything, he sabotaged himself. I think there's a great YouTube video on it. And then the other one is Isaiah Rashad, another great example. Like even Joey, I feel like sold out. Like with his recent shit, it's trying to be trap. It's trying, like same with J. Cole. Like KOD was like trying to have this trap sound. That's not what I want from Cole. That's not why I fell in love with his music. I don't want to hear trap. I want to hear some insightful bars over like a nice piano melody. Anyways, Isaiah Rashad, another great example, could have done this, what all these other, you know, rappers have done, but instead just continued mastering his craft and really making quality music and, you know, personal music. It's just so different.
Capitalism. This force can be described as the culture industry. Now keep in mind that Adorno's theories of the culture industry can be applied to most genres of popular mainstream music and other sectors of mainstream entertainment. But for simplicity's sake, we'll be using mainstream hip-hop as a unique case study example of it. When it comes to the influence of capitalism on music and other sectors of popular culture, the theorists Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer have some of the most compelling insights, particularly Adorno's work on the culture industry and his essays on popular music. I'll give a very quick background for those who don't know. Theodor Adorno was one of the most important philosophers of the Frankfurt School, a group of German academics who escaped the persecution of Adolf Himmler's Germany to the United States. Now you would think that they would have considered America a much better place than Germany, and it was, but that didn't stop them from giving one of the most ruthless critiques of American capitalist ideology and its mass entertainment industry, which according to them, led to a disintegration of culture and also indoctrinated the masses with consumerist capitalist ideology. Not only was Adorno a philosopher and a sociologist, he was also a musicologist who had a talent for playing classical music. He had also studied extensively in Freudian psychology, so he had a deep understanding of the human psyche, and we will see how these skills allowed him to provide one of the most useful insights into mass culture. So then, what exactly is the culture industry? The culture industry is a conglomeration of culture-producing factories, which generate cultural commodities for mass consumption. The term commodity here is key. Popular music is an instance of what Adorno calls cultural commodities, not simply because they are made by the culture industries like big record labels or film studios, but because they are manufactured.
This video is so incredible. I can't even, like, how long did this take? Like, this is what I would love my videos to be if I had 100 hours to put in each one for all these visual, and I don't.
Like all commodities, solely to realize their exchange value on the capitalist market. Songs produced in the culture industry are made to make money, to capture the attention of a mass audience and sell as many records as possible.
Growth and business mindset.
The principal universal characteristic of all popular music, and most products of the culture entertainment industry in general, is what Adorno calls standardization. Standardized music made for mass consumption comes pre-digested. It robs people of their imagination and does the listener's listening for them in advance.
Yeah, it's focus group music.
It delivers music as a pre-packaged commodity so that listeners are only left the task of consuming it. In his theory of standardization, Adorno demonstrated that popular entertainment, and by extension popular music, is standardized by using the same formula to appeal to the masses. Adorno demonstrated that all popular music contained a verse, chorus, bridge, and a 32-bar song form. These elements are interchangeable in most popular songs, and if you listen carefully, these formulas still are used in most popular music today. These formulas manufacture what most people are primed to consider natural music, which consists of these exact common conventions and musical formulas that they are accustomed and conditioned to like. Once you take note of these popular standardized formulas, it becomes pretty evident in most popular music if you just ignore the aesthetics. Hell, don't
Think about the baby right now for me is that, yeah, he said some dumb shit, and my takeaway from that situation was really like, what would compel you to say something like that while you're on, like, why? It's just weird. It's just weird behavior. Why would that even be something you say in general? And then why would you say that on stage in front of a crowd of people, like during your performance? It's just strange. But his verse on Donda is possibly one of my favorite verses on the album. I mean, it's just so good. It's honestly like amazing. I don't know why I like it so much, but it just hits. And it honestly might be because I expect so little of him, and then he came through with just such a great verse. But yeah, if I can separate the art from the artist from the art for a sec, definitely one of my favorite verses on Donda.
take it from Adorno or from me. Take it
But I mean, you have to do that with Kanye anyways, right? Even though it's impossible, so.
from the book titled The Song Machine, Inside the Hit Factory by John Seabrook, or the book titled The Addiction Formula, which both show how most popular music all use very similar strategic formulas for hooks, musical blurs, melodies, rhythms, and repetition that are all crafted in a way to instantly grab your ear's attention and get the song stuck in your head. But the absolute irony of these two books is that the authors wrote them from the perspective of two music insiders trying to show other aspiring pop.
I wonder, like, when they're crafting this perfect song, like, how much of it is the lyrics and the melodies from a person, like, singing, and how much of it is the beat? Because you would think that to grab someone's ear real quick, like, a huge part of it is just the instrumental, right?
Popular artists how to make hits, and not trying to expose the banal homogeneity of the popular music industry, which just goes to show the hegemonic capitalist realist ideology that people have been imbued with. As Theodor Adorno put it, mainstream films and radio music no longer need to present themselves as art. The truth that they are nothing but business is used as an ideology to justify the trash that they intentionally produce.
Okay.
Wow.
That's
Spitting
harsh.
facts. In many ways, music doesn't even have to pretend to be artistic. Capitalist ideology is so pervasive that it is already implicitly accepted that everything is and should be a business. That's why most people tend to judge music based on how many records were sold and the monetary success of the artists, rather than qualitatively judging the actual art for what it is. Even in the hip-hop community, where the notion of selling out was once demonized, it is now commonplace to just accept that artists should make basic hits so that they can get the bag, a saying that perfectly embodies the capitalist.
Not only make basic hits, but literally become memes, like be made fun of, become the butt of a joke so they can get the bag. And, you know, it works. It's a great marketing strategy, but that is what it is at the end of the day. Like, you're telling me Drake's entire last 5 years has been like an intentional meme, right? Travis Scott making that like $400 chicken nugget body pillow, like they know this shit is going to go viral. They know this is going to become a meme, and that is what's going to make the money for them. So it's just interesting how that evolved too, where like you're being made fun of to some level as well.
Realist mindset that has infected hip-hop. For the most part, artists are incentivized to effectively sell out from the very beginning, adapting to the sound of what's popular in order to be accepted, which is why even many unsigned underground or indie artists sound just as standardized as major label artists.
Why is Logic
However,
underground?
if all songs in popular music were completely identical, people would soon tire of them, and the industry would lose profits. So in order to be mass marketed, a hit song must have at least one feature by which it can be distinguished from other hit songs, and yet still possess the complete conventionality and homogeneity of all the other hit songs. For the most part, these slight sonic variations and apparent aesthetic novelties are mostly superficial. Adorno describes these instances as pseudo-individualization. Pseudo-individualization is when different standardized songs are made to look as if they are new by having surface-level distinctive features, such as a catchy hook, different voice effects, a polarizing personality, or an edgy aesthetic. Such surface-level pseudo-individualistic differences fools the listener into thinking that they are consuming a unique musical product, and they forget or never even realize that the music was ever standardized. Even so-called alternative or indie music is heavily co-opted by the culture industry and sold right back to us in standardized form. Don't want to be a basic normie? We got prepackaged alternative music for hipsters who don't fit in. While most standardized music ultimately shares the same set of musical formulas, patterns, and subject matter, the variations in image and aesthetics are by far the most important things that differentiate different standardized acts from each other, by creating an image or consumer identity that fans can identify with. That's why even if different artists may look different on the surface, or even sound slightly different, standardized music rarely ever breaks from the standardized structures of popular music. Popular music cultivates conditioned reflexes that prime listeners to regard standardized music as natural, and anything that deviates from it as unnatural. That's why music which actually attempts to break from popular conventions and standardized formulas is often difficult to listen to for people who have only been exposed to popular music.
But one of my favorite things about a first listen is when I'm sitting there and I'm like, I've never heard music like this before in my life. And I feel like that sometimes happens when I listen to new Kanye albums, like when I listen to Igor for the first time, when I listen to Endless by Frank Ocean for the first time. I don't know any other. SRS, another great example. Like, I mean, I remember listening to that first single off SRS. I think it was Nowhere to Go. And I was just like, what is this? It was so dirty and muffled and like crunchy. And after 2 or 3 times, I was like, this is incredible, but I've never heard anything like it before. And I think that is something really rare nowadays. You know, you listen to the new J. Cole, the new Drake, the new Kanye album, and it's just like, I've heard this before. It's good, sure. It's fine, sure, but I've heard it before. And that's what I really hope with Kendrick is that, you know, how he's been teasing this kind of alt rock thing. I hope it is really something interesting and unique. But even if it's not, I'm sure it'll be great. But I think nowadays, because of what this video is talking about, you have to set yourself apart. And if you don't, there's no way to stand out. There's no way to capture people's ears. And yeah, maybe you'll have your 10 minutes of fame, but then you'll just be gone in the flood of the next artist who's going to copy and paste the same formula. So I think it does pay. Maybe it doesn't pay, but it is, for the longevity of careers, it is important. I mean, look at what happened to Drake at Flog Gnaw recently. He got booed off stage. The best-selling artist of all time, who was a top rapper for an entire generation, got booed off stage by these younger kids because they just don't identify with him. They don't fuck with him. Why? Because they don't have any nostalgic attachment to him from back when he actually made good songs. So they want Frank Ocean. I mean, who wouldn't?
Most people will perceive non-standardized music as boring or unlistenable. People react to it like sugar-addicted kids react to broccoli. Adorno described
Hiding Places by Billy Woods. That's another one. First listen, I was just like, holy shit.
This perfectly. Quote, "There is actually a neurotic mechanism of stupidity in listening. The arrogantly ignorant rejection of everything unfamiliar is its sure sign. Listeners behave like children. Again and again, with the stubborn malice, they demand that one dish that they are usually served. Try showing non-standardized music to a friend or someone you know who only listens to popular standardized music, and you will probably get a reaction like this."
Hello? Mother of God, it's all toilet sounds.
A good example of how average listeners react when popular artists deviate from standardization is when Kendrick Lamar dropped his album To Pimp a Butterfly, arguably his magnum opus and most artistic album. Yep. However, because the album was very unorthodox, with very deep subject matter and the mixing of hip-hop, jazz, and rock and roll, it was perceived as boring by many hip-hop listeners because of the lack of hits, and most importantly, because it hardly subscribed to conventional formulas. In contrast, Kendrick Lamar...
On that, though, I think T-Pab is his best album. It's not my favorite album, and I feel like there's a lot of people who feel that way. And that's fine. I think I would say Damn or Good Kid, Mad City are probably my favorite, just like something that I always want to listen to. I don't always want to listen to Pimp a Butterfly. Also, Punch said that when they were about to drop it, they knew this was going to happen. They literally said, we're going to alienate our fan base. And apparently he had talked about this. There's a tweet about it. He had talked about it with Jay-Z, and Jay-Z was just like, this is what you should do. You have to do this. What are your so I think it's really interesting. And when you really think about it, like, what is this fan base that they're alienating? They're alienating potentially a bunch of white kids who loved Kendrick for his older music and could identify with him up to a certain point. And I think on T-Pab, those general themes that he touched on Good Kid, Mad City that we all know became a little deeper, a little more subtle. He incorporated a lot of music that probably influenced him growing up, it's definitely reasonable to think that that would have alienated and did alienate a lot of his fan base.
His album Damn, which was still a good album, sold immensely more than To Pimp a Butterfly due to having multiple standardized hits.
Yep.
While one album was
and the hits were amazing. They were
far more artistically experimental, the
Kendrick can get away with it.
latter sold a lot more due to conforming to standardized norms.
Way more. Dan was way more mainstream, but like it was amazing. It was unique. It had substance. There's a difference. Like Kendrick can pull that off. Unfortunately, like J. Cole kind of fails. Like KOD, not good. Sorry. Just 3-4 songs maybe that were good. He can't pull it off. He just can't. And it's really rare. How you let a conscious rapper go commercial while only making conscious albums? Kendrick said that, right? Damn is at once a mainstream and a conscious album at the same exact time. Who else can really do that?
Standardization in the music industry
and have it be good, like KOD was just not.
Causes what Adorno calls the regression of listening. When people hear music without listening, standardized music hears for the listener. We aren't supposed to listen to the lyrics, or even listen closely to differentiate the instrumentals. We are just meant to bob our head. The standards of popular music are set so low that the familiarity of the music is often the only prerequisite for it to be considered good. To recognize it is almost the same thing as to like it. If you ask a person why they like a particular hit song, they usually won't be able to tell you why. Often, the response will just amount to saying that the song is catchy. It is often the case that the instrumentals as well as the lyrics of standardized music tend to appeal to listeners' most childish instincts. Standardized songs often incorporate the continuous repetition of an easy-to-follow musical formula comparable to a nursery rhyme-like structure that you would have been conditioned to enjoy as a kid.
That's him, right?
Yeah.
That's him, right?
That's Lil Yachty.
You know what I do with that song, right?
What do you do with that
I
song?
replace the words. Cause listen to the melody. You know what you can replace the words with? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z.
The regression of listening that standardized music cultivates is one of the reasons why people have low attention spans when it comes to music. This has been further exacerbated by the streaming era, where we have all the music of the culture industry right at our disposal for consumption. Whereas previously, aside from listening to songs on the radio of course, people had to mindfully choose which albums they wanted to buy. Because buying albums costs money, and if we are paying money, we better get our money's worth, and listen to the album in its entirety. But now...
and you're going to get attached. And one of the funny things about streaming I notice is that you'll have an album, there's that song you just skip it. I don't know why. Maybe it has like a weird intro, or it's like really loud at the beginning, or you just didn't like how it starts. And that one day, you're just laying there, your eyes closed, listening to music or whatever you're doing, you're walking. That song comes on, you're not skipping it this time, just like not unintentionally. And then you're like, holy shit, what is this? And then you like it.
Now in the streaming era, we can just flick through songs like it's a buffet, or listen to algorithmically crafted playlists of catchy songs that are most effective at getting stuck in our head. The streaming era has arguably caused a further regression of listening that is far worse than anything that Adorno could have imagined. As mentioned earlier, the culture industry often produces commodities that appear different to what is mainstream in order for people to not get fed up with the standardized products. Nowadays, so-called mumble rap has become so pervasive to the point that many hip-hop listeners who feel disaffected with the state of the genre are gravitating to pseudo-rappity-rap rappers who just rap really fast without any content. While these type of rappers may seem superior,
these dudes are honestly worse than mumble rappers, in my opinion. Logic is the perfect example of someone who sold out, someone who could have been a great. But
in contrast, in terms of lyrical skill, they are too also standardized.
I'm a spiritual, lyrical individual, spiritual, miracle, lyrical individual.
spiritual miracle individual. Skipping and flipping and dipping and skipping and flipping and dipping and illest, the killest, the skill and the willest. I'm the realest of the realest. I'm bringing real hip-hop back, don't you ever forget.
Anyways, the standardization does more than just ruin the artistic quality of music. For Adorno, the standardization of music and mass entertainment leads to the standardization of the audience who consumes it. It creates one-dimensional subjects. We are what we consume, after all, and when we consume fast food music on the regular, it has an effect on our mechanical primal ways of thinking and severely liquidates our capacity to actually appreciate art. It's kind of like what happens to little kids who eat a lot of candy and fast food. They no longer can appreciate good, nutritious food. Furthermore, Adorno contrasts popular music to what he calls serious music. Serious music for Adorno is a concrete totality, whereby every detail derives its musical sense from the concrete totality of its piece. Adorno differentiates arts and commodities produced in the culture industry in this quote. Art respects the masses by confronting them as that which they could be, rather than conforming to them in their degraded state. Now there is something.
Art respects the masses by confronting them as that which they could be, right? So it reaches for something higher, some ideal. It's not manufactured with intent to evoke some kind of sexual or monetary desire. To me, the difference is being personal here. Like the missing link is like something that's so personal.
Something to keep in mind. Just because a type of music is standardized does not mean that you are not allowed to like it. Hell, there are plenty of examples of standardized music that I like, such as Travis Scott and Kanye West's hits, and even great rappers such as Biggie Smalls and Tupac have made a few standardized hits. Personal taste in music is mostly subjective, but whether people like something is irrelevant to whether or not it is standardized for mass consumption. Standardized formulas in popular music can be objectively demonstrated, as seen in Adorno's work and the books we mentioned on the Hit Factory. Even if you are not a musicologist, you can detect standardized formulas and melodies quite easily if you just listen carefully. This is often hard to accept, because we may come to the realization that some of our favorite artists, or artists that we identify with on a personal or parasocial level, make standardized music. We want to feel as though our music tastes are unique, as though our
I feel like Olivia Rodrigo is such a good example of this, because she literally sounds like a blend of like Paramore and like 5 different artists, would just like blend it up, and some of the songs are literally just a copy and paste of songs I've already heard before, but they're still good. I still like it.
Consumer identity is different from the others. That being said, while most standardized music contains very surface level subject matter, a song can have a very standardized structure while still having a deep message. As seen in Childish Gambino's Feels Like Summer, Kendrick Lamar's Swimming Pools, Gorillaz' Feel Good Inc., or Outkast's Hey Ya.
Right. And those messages basically have to be buried. They have to be hidden, because if, you know, and especially in the swimming pools example, like the message is the exact opposite of, like, you will hear that song at a party where people are taking shots and it's funny. Like, this is a song that people rage to, but at the same time, the message is the absolute opposite. And that's kind of the genius of it. And I guess Hey Ya would fall into that category too. Yeah, so when we do want a message that's going to reach the masses, it almost has to be cloaked in this, you know, materialism or whatever the trend may be.
But in popular music, this is the exception, not the rule. But feel free to share your favorite artists in the comment section below, or artists that you think don't make standardized music. Nevertheless, it is worth mentioning that the separation that Adorno makes between serious music and popular music can seem a little bit elitist. Adorno typically comes off as an armchair academic snob who hated everything popular. And if you think that music critics like Anthony Fantano are picky, boy, you have not seen anything yet. This man really hated mainstream jazz. Granted, the 1920s to 1950s type of mainstream white people jazz, not the artistic kind of jazz made by the likes of Miles Davis, which was quite the opposite of standardized. But imagine how Adorno would react to things like mumble rap, EDM, or pop music today in general. But ultimately, I think that most of Adorno's points about popular music still hold true. But people may still object by saying something like, "But don't people want this stuff?" These artists are just giving people what they want, right? The promoters and producers of commercialized entertainment exonerate themselves by referring to the rationalization that they are giving people what they want. Now, Adorno is careful with his words. He differentiates the term culture industry from mass culture because he does not want to imply that it is necessarily the fault of the masses for liking these things. Rather, the culture industry artificially cultivates these needs to which masses passively accept and become conditioned to enjoy. Most of the time, the first music that an individual hears is standardized popular music. Often that is—
Honestly, I remember I did not like rap when I first heard it because the way that I was exposed to rap initially was on the radio, and it just wasn't something that I mean, it wasn't for me. But I think once I heard what first got me like really into rap probably was Illmatic. When I moved to New York, I listened to Illmatic for the first time. That was incredible. And I realized there was something beyond that, right? And then I think I started hearing about Mac Miller, and probably just, even though like Mac Miller was very materialistic at first, I feel like it resonated with me because I loved Illmatic so much, and he had that kind of 90s style, at least in his beats and the way he like approached, and he was really clever. But yeah, it's interesting how like the first music, I don't know, like what was the first rap music you were exposed to? Like, was it on the radio? Was it someone showing you? Be interesting to hear.
It is the only kind of music they are exposed to. Nobody is just simply born with the taste of what is sold in popular music. Taste is cultivated. And when the only music you are exposed to is popular standardized formulaic music, then of course you will develop a taste for it. This creates a consumption cycle where demand is cultivated, and then more standardized music is reproduced for mass consumption to meet this demand, which then creates more demand, and the cycle repeats itself. While the overarching formulas of hit songs tend to largely stay the same over time, certain stylistic variations can become trends, and then what follows is other artists follow these trends. A new standard is set. And when certain artists pioneer a certain trend or record labels capitalize on it, other artists and record labels then start to imitate that trend and start putting out music that sounds exactly like this, in order to capitalize on the new standard that has been set. Even most unsigned upcoming artists tend to follow standardized formulas and ride cultural trends. This does not only apply to mainstream artists. To get a record deal in the first place, or even be heard in the streaming era, artists often have to imitate or conform to the sound of what is already popular in the culture industry. This is one of the reasons why the culture industry breeds imitation over innovation. This of course applies to many sectors of capitalist society in general, not just the culture industry. If you are an artist in capitalist society, why put so much time and effort into—
I do think imitation is necessary. So if you see my video on Kendrick's 5 Steps, he started out imitating all the greats, Jay-Z, Biggie, Nas, DMX. He was imitating them, and I think that's really important to growth. But you have to be able to make it personal. This goes back to like my thing of like, the biggest missing piece here for me is having music be personal, something that Earl and Isaiah Rashad are really good at, because they're unfazed by this bullshit. Yeah.
To making good quality art and prioritizing quality over quantity, when you can just get more cash and clout by making catchy songs with extremely simplistic melodies that sound similar to what is already popular. Why risk pouring a lot of money and effort into a brand new innovative creative project?
Oh, what I was going to say is Baby Keem is a great example. He pulled like his album Melodic Blue, right? You hear that Travis influence, you hear that Kanye influence, you hear that Kendrick influence. I saw a tweet, it was like, Baby Keem sounds like if one of Kendrick's voices escaped and then grew its own body. Like that. Yes, you hear that. But then he adds something unique on there. And I think, hopefully for his next album, it'll be more unique, less those influences. But you hear both happening. And I think the influence of these influences is a little too strong still for him to like really emerge as like a great, but he has the potential. And it's just such a clear example of like, you hear all these artists in his work, but he is innovating.
When you can just keep rehashing the same 100 sequels to the same movie or video game because you know it will sell. And because the entertainment industry in capitalist societies are largely dominated by a few oligopolies, they are subjected to the rule of endless upward economic growth, by nature incentivizing them to take precautions in order to make the most amount of money possible, thereby discouraging more risky innovations.
House Pro offers an easy-to-use 3D design tool that helps clients visualize
how capitalism ruined the
For Adorno, another reason why people passively accept the low standards of popular music and the low-effort entertainment in general of the culture industry, no matter how mediocre, is because such repetitive, simplistic products coincides with the banal, repetitive lifestyles of work under capitalism. In capitalist
Damn, he took it there,
society, we are trained to perceive work and leisure as diametrically opposed. At work, we are expected to be as productive as possible, and in our time off, indulge in leisure activities that require absolutely zero thinking, in order to escape the misery of work. Drained of all energy after working all day, people are exhausted and don't want art or entertainment that will challenge them. Except for the people who watch this channel, of course. Drudgerous, repetitive work schedules under capitalism deny people any novelty, so they seek novelty in their time off. But the strain and boredom associated with the work life and the amount of energy that is drained from them leads to avoidance of any effort in their leisure.
I mean, this is so true. After working an entire workday, you don't have energy to pursue your passion projects. You're like, I don't have energy to make a video or work on content. Like, you barely have energy to even listen to an interesting album. Like, I was trying to listen to the Little Sims album. It was hard. I was struggling. I was like, I want to go back to this Baby Keem copy and paste Travis Scott, Kanye West mashup album. I was like too exhausted to listen to Little Sims, but like I was craving this Baby Keem album. And yes, it's good, but also because it's familiar, it's catchy, and it blends some of the best aspects of my favorite artists that I already know and love. I don't have to put mental energy into this. It's just like reading. Reading has gotten harder because it's so much mental energy when I already expend all my mental energy on my day job, So I think this is such a big problem because people, it's not their fault. We just don't have the mental energy to work, deal with our stressful lives, and then go and learn and create and absorb new ideas. Sometimes you just want to sit there and rewatch a show you just want to watch The Office, There's something comforting about it, something, you're going to laugh, you're going to feel good, you're going to come out with a positive experience there, and you know what you're going to get, and you're going in, it's like fast food. You always know what you're going to get, the quality that it's going to be, and that's what's great about it. It's consistent, and it's what you expect, and it makes you feel good. So you really can't blame the people.
Leisure time. Anything involving the slightest critical thinking is too much work, and learning is perceived as a chore. So as a substitute, they crave a stimulant. Popular music comes to offer it, along with other stimulants, perhaps.
This is the craziest thing about Instagram and why I had to stop using it, is that you'll be on there and you don't even know what happened. 30 minutes just pass and, I'll be there and I'm looking at like a Lil Uzi Vert memes. Like, and I'll just snap out of it for a second, be like, how did I get here? And where am I? And why am I here? And like, I wish I didn't just do that. But you keep coming back for it, right?
The repetitive nature of popular entertainment conditions people specifically for the repetitive nature of work, even if that's not its direct intention.
I would say more than this, it starts with school, right? The repetitive nature of school, where you're literally just trained as a little like parrot so that you can just repeat things. You're not really learning anything. You're just given something and then you spit it back out. You're just memorizing, you're repeating. Not to mention school, if you really think about it, school is like an 8-hour workday. It's literally 8 hours. You go somewhere you don't want to be, learn repetitive things you don't want to learn, and then you go home. Unfortunately, with school, you still have to do homework, which is, you know, if you can't teach someone something in 8 hours, like, what are you doing? But whatever. There's a parallel there.
Robotic working habits and habitual escapist consumption is a perfect recipe for capitalist social control. Lastly, the culture industry plays a big role in reproducing the dominant capitalist social ideology, which rationalizes the practices of the culture industry and also contaminates the lyrical content of the music itself. It limits subject matter to the confines of what conforms to the capitalist reason of generating profits, reproducing, purchasing commodities, and egoistic first-world problems. And of course, promoting art that challenges capitalism or fosters a critical consciousness is not in the interest of the culture industry, which is primarily owned by rich capitalists and mainly rewards artists who care the most about money and fame. But in some cases, however, the culture industry can also perform our anti-establishment desires for us. We have pseudo-anarchist rock bands, movies with evil rich villains to hate, and even so-called conscious rappers that remind us of the obvious of how police are killing black people. At best, some popular artists will be politically woke on a few issues, but not beyond a surface level or in a way that escapes the logic of capitalism. Popular music, and more explicitly, mainstream materialistic hip-hop, reinforces what the theorist Antonio Gramsci calls cultural hegemony, whereby we adopt the ideals of the ruling class. This reinforces the dominant ideology, which is, by its nature, the ideology of the dominant class.
I've also been thinking about this a lot lately, is that the ruling class, like our, kings and queens are celebrities. Like they're just worshipped by our society, like the way we worship brands and materialism and buying things, buying the newest iPhone every year, even though there's barely a difference, etc. Is like we also worship celebrities in a very similar way, and they influence our lives to such a massive degree where like we will compare ourselves to them, knowing that the lives that they're portraying are completely false. Their pictures are doctored. Everything about them is fake, and we'll still try to live up to their ideals, which we just internalize, even if that's not something we ourselves care about.
Capitalist ideology in hip-hop can be further understood by what can be called the spectacle, which is an omnipresent social relation of late capitalist society mediated by images, where people relate to each other via representation and showing. In the society of the spectacle, having wealth itself is not the main motif, but rather it is showing that one is wealthy which is the most important thing, and how we display our social capital to each other. The shiny suit era, the bling era, and the so-called mumble rap era of today are all in a way cultural products of the spectacle. This doesn't need much explaining. Just watch a hip-hop music video and it's quite obvious. Showing off money, cars, naked girls, and expensive commodities is the basis of much of the subject matter and the brand image of many of these.
I mean, wealth is relative, right? And this act of showing wealth, even just for us regular people, non-celebrities, is almost like a way to differentiate ourselves from each other, to say, I have this, so here's where my place in society is. Oh, well, my car has the Mercedes or BMW logo, where everybody else is driving like a Toyota. Like what is really the purpose of that when the cars are very similar? It's a differentiator, right? And, interpret what's being differentiated there. Like, do people think they're better than others? Are people just showing their place in society? I feel like probably somewhere in between there, but I would lean towards that. People are just trying to show where they belong and what, like what cloth they're cut from. But we are so obsessed with showing the value of the things we have in an effort to like differentiate ourselves from other people who we perceive as less wealthy. And yeah, it's interesting to think that maybe that comes from the top, right? That comes from the flexing that we see constantly.
These hip-hop acts. Even if none of it is actually real, it is the presentation that counts as reality. This spectacle in hip-hop further cultivates the pseudo-needs for egotistical aspirations, materialistic purchases, and most importantly, communicating the message to the world on social media that we are doing these things. It is no coincidence that many rappers and even hip-hop fans who identify with the image wear fake jewelry, grills, Yeezys, and shoot videos with rented cars. For the spectator, these celebrity rapper icons are like gods.
And why do they do this? Like, it's so dumb to go rent a car and shoot a video with it, or like rent a woman and have her like dancing for your video. But like, why? Because we, the consumers, are conditioned. Oh, rap video, it's going to have this in it. When it does, oh, there it is. Like, imagine if it was just something completely different. It would be confusing. It would be weird. It wouldn't, like, you go on World Star and you know what you're going to see there. You're going to see the rap videos, the shitty rap videos with the same exact thing at each one, right? What would happen if you just clicked on one of those videos and it was just like some dude at a desk, like scribbling on a notepad? You'd be like, all right. You'd be confused. Maybe you'd be intrigued, but realistically, it's just like we are actually conditioned to not only expect this, but to want it. And if we weren't, then it wouldn't be like that, but it is. Every single video is really the same exact thing. It's a copy and paste too. There's nothing creative or interesting about it. You could replace the rapper with a different, like, it's just the exact same thing, but clearly it's effective. Otherwise people wouldn't do it.
To have successfully attained this need, which was artificially created. But in reality, the rappers and pop stars alike are essentially just commodities sold to us for consumption. While the real capitalist owners of the culture industry, like record labels, streaming platforms, and the brands endorsed by these artists, are the ones who profit the most. But now try imagining music and art outside a capitalist society, one not driven by profit. It's not easy, is it? The mind prison of capitalist realism makes it hard to think outside of the capitalist logic that has been entrenched into our minds. If the capitalist mode of production was replaced with a socialist one, where profiting from other people's work is illegal and instead people owned what they produced, and where everyone had access to basic necessities of life like housing, education, food, and healthcare.
Okay. So where profiting from other people's work is illegal and people own what they produce. So that's a really good point because musicians don't own their music. So it's very rare that a rapper, especially, or any musician really, as far as I've heard, actually owns their music. And that's a really big deal. And that is a really great way to tie this to socialism, to say that under capitalism, musicians are essentially just commodities. But if people were creating music that they had full ownership of, they might not feel these pressures that they would want to make the most money possible and, partner with brands and stuff. But it seems like there would be more of an opportunity, because the way it is right now, if you sign to a label, they own your music. They're not going to give you the option, oh, well, do you want to partner with Fortnite for you're doing it. Like, you don't have the option. If you turn it in, if you have a major record label and you turn in some album that's super left field, super experimental, like, they're like, this isn't going to sell. Where's the single, right? So they're pushing you in that direction. So as long as you have that, either contractually or they're just whispering in your ear, the art is going to suffer. The experience for everyone involved is going to suffer, except for the owners, the label, who's going to be just profiting. So they profit, everyone else suffers, or we just do the obvious thing, which is let artists own their own music. These principles apply to the music industry would make it better for everybody, literally everyone, except for the people at the very top who are reaping all of the benefits and don't even care about the music. And again, like if an artist just is only in it for the money, which that's fine, they should still be able to do those things, and they will be, but it's just a very different conversation when you're contractually obligated to do what the label tells you and they have creative control over your music.
Then we could create a society where artistic expression is more possible. And the collective ownership over a lot of industries could possibly abolish copyright, which is one of the most corrosive aspects of capitalist societies that hinders artistic freedom. A post-capitalist society would also lessen the incentives of selling out, the pressures to succumb to standardization, and to create art not reliant on the profit motive, which would ultimately attract artists who really want to create art for art's sake, and not just to become rich. Such a society can definitely work, but the real question is how to bring about its implementation, and that's a whole other debate. But for now,
so one issue I have with this is, why is this criticism of, oh, you're not creating art for art's sake? Why is this criticism only used against hip hop or even popular music? Because you never hear that when talking about someone who plays in an orchestra who's just playing the sheet music that they're given, that they didn't write. And obviously this is different, but at the end of the day, it's still a career that they've chosen. They're doing it for the money, unless they're also pursuing some kind of solo career on the side, which they're still doing this as their day job to fund. So I just think it's a little unfair that we only criticize hip hop or even pop music in this way, but the rest of the musical world is completely absolved of this.
Now, in order for any solution to be remotely attainable, more people have to understand the problem in the first place. Now, as promised, here are my favorite hip-hop artists. Most of them are underground, but a lot of them are quite famous. MF Doom, Tupac Shakur, Nas, Outkast, Earl Sweatshirt, Vince Staples, Ab-Soul, Isaiah Rashad, Billy
Ab-Soul is so underrated. There's Billy Woods.
Akala, Atmosphere, Dead Prez, Death Grips, Run the Jewels, Aesop Rock, Quelle Chris, Jean Grey, Black Thought, nice. Rhapsody, Talib Kweli, Mos Def, Roy.
I'm pretty sure Rhapsody only got discovered because Mac Miller saw a YouTube video of her, which is just another ode to Mac Miller, but also what are the chances, you know, if you're a really good artist, actually one of your only ways to actually make it through to the masses is to have some other artist who's actually good discover you. And I know Isaiah Rashad put Jin and Earth Gang on early on. He was a big supporter of their music. And that's another example. An interesting thing about Jin and Earth Gang is that they bring that new edge and energy to conscious music. So like they are spitting conscious bars. They're talking about deep stuff. They're talking about personal issues. But it's different, right? Because it incorporates that Atlanta energy. It incorporates that those new styles of rap in such a unique way. So I think that's just like a really great example of this like middle ground between more of like a trap mumble rap sound, a more materialistic sound, and then something that's conscious, but it doesn't sound like it's conscious. It actually sounds almost like similar to like Young Thug or Travis Scott. And it also has that kind of old school vibe to it. Like you can definitely hear Erykah Badu influence for Earth Gang especially. But at the same time, they have bangers and you know, they have that kind of music that you can just immediately bob your head to.
Race to 5'9", Shad, Brother Ali, No Name, Blue, Lupe Fiasco, Mike, Immortal Technique, and my favorite, Ka. And Artin Salimi, of course.
I need to listen to Ka really bad. People keep telling me.
Go subscribe to him and check out his wonderful music. Links in the description. Now, what artists do you think escaped the conventions of standardization? Feel free to comment your thoughts. I'd love to know who your favorite artists are.
Well, that video is incredible. Learned a lot. I could probably watch that like 3 more times, honestly. Had a really good time just reacting. Thanks for watching. Check out some of my other videos. If you're watching for the first time, this is the kind of stuff that I try to do on my channel. Obviously, I have my own spin. So if you thought that video was interesting, you should definitely check out some of my videos, especially this video I did on J. Cole, where I used the lyrics from one of his most underrated tracks to break down wealth inequality. So definitely check that out, and I'll see you next time.
Sample, 808, hi-hat, snare, arm full of armfuls and hands in the air. Jolly love, only live with no care. Abundance of substance, me never share.
Repetition, repetition, it's all the same to me. Loaded dice, never bang but claim to be chasing the hits like a masochist chained to me. Artless dodgers of the cultural change, you see Adorno.
Okay.
So pronto to clock this art serious, never written for the optics. Popular sonics, orthodox like Coptic. 32 bar chorus, 1 octave. Concentration of the powers increase. Freedom of choice, the way you listen to decreased. Cutthroat decibels.
So DJ Khaled.
Abusing lobotomies, music becomes a consumer commodity. Fetishized lives till you dream their doorstep. Free adverts for martinis and Porsches. Colonized raps, Italian sources. They sell hollow asses, that's Trojan horses. Most def told us who's running this rap shit. Most definitely still running this rap shit. Old white men and corporate forces. Couple years back, ride white hoods and torches.